So hello, sorry that I'm not gone live for the last few days. I've been awfully busy. Just try to tidy up the Viking space. Perhaps I could do that on live stream. Hold up, I found my necklace. I'll be looking for that. So yes, just wait for some people to come along. If you don't know who we are, what we do, I am Braggy or Andy in the real world. And this is a channel where we talk about Viking and Norse history. But we like all sorts of history on the channel, whether it's from the Bronze Age, up to the modern day, really. I mean, history is an amazing thing, and let's not forget history, because if we forget history, we forget who we are and where we come from. And it's so important that we remember history, we remember our ancestors, and we remember our heritage. So yes, what am I going to reveal on the camera today, which is a secret? Oh, well, I do have a little bit of news, which when we get enough people in this live stream, I may tell you something about the future of the channel and something quite interesting. But yes, I'm glad I found that. This is, of course, a Thor's hammer, Majonia. People always pronounce it wrong. You've got to emphasise the nia at the end. But then again, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. So let's just go back and see the live messages, see everybody's live. A bit of an impromptu live stream. I think I last did one. Was it on Friday? I forget now. No, it was Thursday because I went out on Friday, which I'll tell you about in a bit when we've got some more people. What I did on Friday, something was very interesting, and yeah. So do give us a like. Do say hello wherever you may be. We've got hello Braggy. So hello, it's Sanjar. How are you, my friend? Lovely to see you here. And yeah, it's been a good week last week on the channel when one of the videos went viral. And on average, I think in a month we do around about 300,000 views. But so far, in the last 4 weeks, we've done 1.4 million. So it was really nice to go viral, even though it wasn't the sort of video I would have liked to have gone viral with. I would have liked to have gone viral with a more history-based video. But, I welcome it all the same. And it's one of those fully jokey videos. But as my friend was saying, he said, well, those are always the videos that do go viral. It's never the video you want to go viral. And no doubt, I think down the line, now the video's flatlined, massive flatline, big spurt of growth of about 1 million views, and then it's flatlined again. I think it will probably go up again at some point, because it's only 12 days old, which is pretty amazing. So we've got 2 people watching. Excellent. How are you both today? Please do let me know in the comments. And don't forget also, if you've got a second, to go and like the video, like the live stream, because it's so important that you like the live stream. Because you never know, one day we may end up on the live stream shelf on YouTube where it recommends us and say, oh, look at this dude. And then I'm not dressed as a Viking today. And I was going to do some filming as a Viking today, but it's been so warm in the UK, and I went into town, Derby Centre, which is a Norway Point, about 3 miles that way, and had a lovely couple of pints, walked back home, yes, and enjoyed that. And whenever I'm going to Derby and have a couple of beers, I always film those videos. But I think it's quite important that we do have a few of these videos where I talk about beer and I review the beer I drink, because it's not for me, it's for the wide world audience, so we could show off in the UK what British beer looks like. Although at the moment I am actually drinking water because I'm thirsty, so cheers everybody. Well, yes, I do love, and amazing when you're doing reenactment, because normally, we take this stuff for granted, water, because let's face it, well, when you're doing reenactment and you just done a medieval battle, or maybe you're doing a World War II battle, or whatever period of history you're doing, it's amazing how much you appreciate water, especially during the battle. Because you may be carrying a canteen if you're lucky, or you may have a leather vessel, a bit like this one here, to put your water in. But it's amazing how much we appreciate water on camp. And I don't half drink a lot of it whenever I've done battle reenactment, because you get so thirsty and you've got to try to ration your water throughout the battle, because the one thing you don't want to end up, with is, not having enough water. So yes, did I hear a bell though? I'm not sure whether that was me. So just go look at your comments. Bruce Dog, well, what you doing, Braggy? I'm just doing a general live stream. I'll read your comments, answer your questions. Yeah, and then we'll just talk about anything you want me to talk about. I could talk about fullers on blades and maybe talk about some of the Saxon words and the Norse words. Fundamentally, in the Anglo-Saxon and Norse language, there isn't fundamentally a word for a fuller. And here we see a Viking blade, and this line in the centre, this groove, is a fuller, or often referred to as a blood groove, but there isn't actually within the Viking language an actual word for it. There's words that describe it, because often these words would have been used in Saxon and Viking or Norse poetry. But perhaps we could talk about that. We could also, if you want me to talk about what is Norse paganism and talk a little bit about that as well, I could do that. So yeah, I'm doing good. I've had a good few days. Was it Tuesday? So I had a busy weekend. When we've got a few more people, I'll tell you what I did at the weekend. So, yeah, so Linda Cosmar says, thank you for doing this presentation. Well, you're more than welcome, but thank you for taking part of being at the other end of the camera watching and on the live stream, because it's so important. And I know I've said in the last few weeks, I'm going to try to do a daily live stream, but, you know, life has just caught up with me. I've just been a little bit busy last few days. I've had a few nights. I went out on Sunday to a local pub, had a couple of lovely pints with my neighbours. We had a bit of a walk around Darley Abbey, learned a little bit more history about the place, because I always love, you know, going out with older folk who know a lot about the place where I come from, because they say, oh yeah, this place used to be the doctors in the day, and this house used to be the vicarage, and here used to be a garage. And it's amazing what you learn, because older people that have lived a bit longer than myself have lived, and they've seen places change. And Darley Abbey, where, you know, it's about a mile this direction, is such a lovely place, and I just love it by the river. Of course, the River Derwent. But if you go back in time, you know, 1,200 years, back in the early 9th century, then you would have had Vikings rowing up it in longboats or longships. So let's just go to your comments, because I do love reading your comments, and not enough YouTubers do this. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future when we get 1,000 people watching, whether I could actually, we'll have to do it through Super Chat, I think. Is the way that I'll have to read comments in the future, when we'll have to adapt, because I literally been on live streams and the comments are just going like that straight up. You can't possibly ever read them all. So yes, it's a pleasure to do what we do on this channel. And yeah, now and again I put out a bit cringy content, but most of the content I do try to put out when I've got the time will be really good content. But we do had 2 nice videos tonight out. One on projectile, which is Francisca's. There's a Francisca. It needs a new handle, because whoever made the handle for this didn't do a very good job. And at some point, I want to buy a far better Francisca, because this has just been put together and not being forged on a forge. But you know, new handle, that'll be done in a video, and that'll probably be a 1 episode crafting video where I'll demonstrate making a new handle for it, because I do love making handles. And I got to think about editing the next episode of the crafting video where I'm crafting a club. Hopefully at some point along that series I will get to the end and actually finish the club off. Whether it'll work out as a club is another thing. Because some days when you make something, you make an axe or you make a club, or, you know, I've even done it where I made a hat. I made a hat once, so the hat was so big. It's around somewhere. It's just I got to take it all apart and sew it all back together again and make the pattern smaller. But so you do make mistakes when you're making kit for this period of history. So let's just go back to your comments. So Bruce Dog says, nice. Usually my name is Chunky Monkey. Yes, because people tend to have 2 names on YouTube, so it gets a little bit confusing. So I try to remember Chunky Monkey. I could always remember your name and all the lovely comments you've left on the channel over the years, and you've been subscribed for a long time, but it is a little bit confusing. I think what YouTube need to do when it comes to the name is have your one name and then have your other name in brackets, and it will really help content creators like me to remember who we're talking to. But for some reason it says Bruce Dog. Yeah, and some days if you see your name and numbers, that's the name YouTube's giving you. So that's a little bit frustrating, and YouTube really need to sort that. Then we have a comment here from Esnajar. Najar, I think that's how I pronounce it. People mostly drunk beer. Is that true? Well, yes, generally so. So let's say you're in a village or you're in a town or you're in a farmstead and your water source isn't pure, isn't clean, and you know it is because you drink the water and it makes you sick. So you have to find a way to purify your water. So yeah, you could go to the trouble of purifying your water, running it through various filters. They had different methods of doing that. Or you could boil it afterwards and also eradicate any germs. So they knew about doing that as well, because boiling water as a source for drinking is such an old thing, and we've been doing it for for as long as we've had fires and the ability to boil water. But of course, as we progress from the Neolithic, from living in caves, we progress to living on the land and not being nomads. We learnt about and grew crops. And of course, one of the byproducts of growing crops like wheat and barley is brewing and ale. And let's face it, I love a beer. I've had 2 lovely beers today. And so they would have made beer all the time. Now, if you work or you got any experience of working in a bar or in a pub, I mostly drink what you call bitter or pale ale. And that doesn't last too long. The shelf life for a barrel of beer is 3 to 7 days generally. And the amount of times I've had a beer and it's like, ooh, that's horrible, because it's at the end of its life and it's at the bottom of the barrel. And a lot of pubs, they struggle to sell 60 pints of bitter, but not everybody drinks it. A lot of people like to drink lager. A lager doesn't go off so quickly as bitter does. So they learnt the ability to brew ale because it was a good way of purifying your water, and it was also alcoholic. And I think ever since we learnt the ability to make alcohol and to make beer, they've had the ability to make it and to also purify water, and it gets rid of your germs. And so what they used to do was to make 3 sorts of ale. So you have your weak ale, which is a bit like shandy, today, and everybody would be drinking that, whether you was an infant or whether you was a child or very elderly. And then they had the medium beer, which is more like an average beer today, 4 to 6%. And then they had what you call your top of the table beer, which was more higher percentage. It lasted a little bit longer because of the alcohol content, but also was for special occasions and for guests. Because if you had somebody come round to your longhouse, or if you was in the Iron Age to your roundhouse, you wouldn't want to insult them by, having them, come in, because hospitality is a very old thing. So you wouldn't say, "Oh, come round, come in, come and sit by the hearth. Oh, let's just give them some of the wheat beer." You don't do that, because that'll be an insult, and they would know, because you'll be able to tell from the taste that this is a wheat beer. So wheat beer was reserved for everyday drinking, and people used to drink a lot more beer in the day. And certainly they probably had a higher tolerance to beer as well. But then again, they used to work all day and graft hard. So you imagine, you get up in the morning, you have a breakfast. If you're not lucky enough to have a pure water source, you may be having a pint of beer. And then later on in the morning, you maybe have a couple more pints. You're working in the field or you're working your forge. You go for lunch, you probably have another pint at least. Or although a pint of beer is a more of a modern equivalent, they certainly knew about measurements when it came to measurements. But of course, a lot of the time they'll be using drinking horns and wooden vessels. So you may be having 3 or 4, wooden cups full of beer for your lunch with bit of meat or something like that, maybe a stew. And then you continue drinking throughout the daytime, and then you continue drinking in the evening. When the sun sets is when you settle down for the evening, and you have a few more beers on the longhouse, sit by your hearth, and then you'll go to bed early. They won't stay up late like we do in modern world, because they want to get up early. It's very important in those days when you're surviving, when you're trying to feed yourself and raise crops, because most people had a bit of land and most people relied on farming as a way to survive and to produce food. Unless you was rich and wealthy, if you was a landowner and you had quite a lot of land and people were renting your farms from you, then you could use that money to buy the produce, go to market, and you'd have the staff and you'd have the servants to do that for you. So if you're like an earl, or you may be a jarl in the Viking terms, you could fundamentally afford to get the best food in. So you'd be having more of a pleasurable life, going hunting, going out with birds of prey, going after deer, going to see your friends and going to the mead hall, because you won't be having to rely on work in the land because you got coin. Well, certainly they knew and understood that, and that's such an old thing, an old tradition. But majority of people would be quite poor, and therefore you'd be working the land all day. And then Bruce Dog says, Braggy once did a 3-hour live stream during COVID, laughed out loud. I did. In fact, I think my longest record for a live stream is nearly 7 hours, where I had about 2 or 3 pints of beer. And I think maybe at some point in the future, we'll attempt to do some longer live streams when I've not got to go and get some food in a bit. And I haven't got to think about doing other things, and I need to do a bit of tidying up. But I thought I'd pop on just to say hello, so you know that I'm still here. Hello, I'm still here, in my modern clothes. And then Bruce Dog said, that is interesting. I didn't know they used to filter their water. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of speculation about it, but I think it makes sense, because let's face it, if you're getting water from a source like a stream or a river, you certainly want to drain it somehow. And certainly we know that they had charcoal systems and systems of using sand to filter. So it kind of makes sense. You may have a leather sack and you may have another leather sack, and they've got layers of charcoal, or maybe you have a wooden structure. I mean, I don't think I know of any when it comes to archaeological evidence, but I'd be interested if anybody does know. But somehow they had to filter the water. But let's face it, if your water source isn't pure, and you got all microbes and all manner of things in water, leaf matter, dirt, and your water's brown, you don't want to board it in that condition, do you? So you need to purify it somehow. And I think using charcoal and sand is such an old method when it comes to purifying. In fact, in the modern world, if you're a prepper and you're trying to filter water, you'd have a charcoal sand system, and you could buy these mechanisms and containers, or you can make one yourself, and I know people do. And and then Linda says pale ale was like champagne. Did I hear that right? No, pale ale is just a very weaker beer, but they did have stuff like Perrier. So they have a beer made or a drink made from pears. So Perrier was certainly a thing, and I certainly had the ability and knowledge to make cider. And of course, if you're wealthy enough, you could also import beer or import wine. So they also had wine, and we always think, because they're localized, the trade and what the goods they can get hold of were quite localized. But that's not fundamentally true, because if you was wealthy, if you could afford one of these, then you could certainly, or you could afford one of these, then you could certainly afford to have wine from Francia or other parts of the world or Europe. So trade was such an important thing, and let's face it, as long as big people have had the ability to sail a longship, they had the ability to trade in different places of the world. And this is what the Vikings were very well known for, or the Norse, to be the correct term. But of course, they're also well known for raiding as well. But whether they made more money out of trading or whether they made more money out of raiding is a whole entire question. I imagine trading was probably bigger, but the Vikings like to go and get stuff for free. But then probably most cultures would at some point were doing that. I mean, the Romans, for instance, went and raided all over the place, but they also took over the place they raided and added it to the empire, which is why the Roman Empire got so big. But it got so big to the point where it couldn't sustain itself, and then the Roman Empire collapsed in the 4th or 5th century. This is a whole entire debate and a whole entire subject, and perhaps further down the line we will think about covering the Roman period perhaps on the channel. Well, yes, again, so Bruce Dog says, I know in the later Tudor time they used to collect their rainwater as they knew it was pure. Well, certainly, if you go back to the medieval and Tudor times, rainwater was very pure. Unlike today, where it's not so pure, and to say that you shouldn't drink rainwater that's not been boiled up because of all the trace chemicals that are in it. Whether that's true, I'd imagine there's a little hint of truth to that. But yeah, I mean, I'd be quite interested to collect some rainwater and actually drink it and see whether it makes me ill. But then again, do you want to put yourself in that situation and give yourself a bad stomach bug? Probably not. But certainly, as long as I've had the ability to collect rainwater, and let's face it, we've been learning to make barrels for an awful long time throughout history. From probably again from the Bronze and Iron Age, we've had the ability to make wooden barrels. Certainly more when it came to the Iron Age, because barrels do need a bit of iron for the construction. And if you've ever seen anybody make a barrel, it's such a fascinating craft. And there are some really good videos on there, and perhaps one day I'll find one of them and share it on the community post, and you can go and watch some old guy from years ago make a wooden barrel in a couple of hours. And it's such a, coopering is the art form, and it is a fascinating and old thing. And certainly, barrels do go back a long time. So it makes sense if you've got a shingled roof, and even to a certain degree a thatched roof, and you can have some form of guttering to collect the rainwater, then that was quite essential. But then again, if you're building a long house on a settlement, you're going to build it where you've got a water source, really, or where you can dig into the ground and get a well. Because if you're on the top of a hill and there's no water source, that's going to cause you a lot of problems, because you're going to have to do a lot of walking to your water source every day. So, I think it's quite common for places where they built farmsteads and they found, buildings in the ground that were made, or just maybe the post holes, then they generally would have been near water sources. And it makes sense. If you're going to build a long house, don't build it where there's no water on a hill, build it a bit lower down in a valley. So a lot of these constructions and buildings were built in the valley bottoms because they was close to water, and water is such an important thing. We need it every day. Yes, so do ask any more questions, and I think we definitely do take water for granted these days. And it's quite interesting to see some of these multi-rich directors are part of water companies that kind of say, well, water isn't a right, it should be a privilege. And we certainly pay a lot of money to have water put to your house, and I certainly pay a lot of money. My water rate is ridiculous at £120 a month, and so I tend to use my hose pipe a lot in the garden and make sure I'm using my money's worth. And perhaps if I've got a meter and installed a meter in my house, it may save me a few quid. But then again, I live in a tremendous big house and I live in a tremendous big garden. So, but it all takes time. And then Bruce Dog says, "Oh, Bruce Dog, are you making dinner yet? And what is it so far?" Well, today I've had a hot sausage roll, and I do love a hot sausage roll from a Pound bakery shop. So I don't know what I'm going to have for my dinner yet. I've not thought about that. Last night I had steak and chips, and I must say it was lovely. Although I do have a bit of toothache here, so I've got to be careful eating. It tends to come and go, and I need to find a dentist, but trying to find a dentist at the moment is just ridiculous in the UK, and the government needs to spend a lot of money on dentistry and giving people access to it. But I mostly manage it with, making sure I clean my teeth right. But clove oil, that's such a wonderful thing, isn't it? You put a little bit of dab of clove oil where you got toothache. And I don't think it's toothache. I got a bit of irritation with my gum near my wisdom tooth that's half showing and popping up. So, but again, how would you manage toothache back in the day? Because let's face it, dentists are not like the day. So back in the day, there you are. There's old Iwick, and he's got some toothache, and he goes to see the local blacksmith and said, "Oh, I've got some terrible toothache in this tooth." So he could get some pliers and maybe wangle it out and take the tooth out. Or the other thing they would do would get a bit of wire, made out of mild steel, and they would heat the wire up so it's white hot, and then they would jab it into the tooth a few times. You probably need somebody holding the mouth back so you don't actually burn your mouth as well and burn around your lips. And they would just jab the hot wire into your tooth. And then with the wire being so hot, it would burn your tooth away inside and get rid of your toothache, because you're fundamentally burning off the nerve, which causes a lot of the pain when it comes to toothache. So that's one method they would use. But they also knew about the plants and the herbs, and they could eat and chew things and make poultices you could put in your mouth. And perhaps at some point in the future, we'll do a little bit of deeper research, and I try to remember from some of the books I got about how to deal with toothache in the medieval times. But then again, he also makes you think, well, how did they clean their teeth? Because they didn't have toothbrushes like we had. So what they'll do, they'll just go to a willow tree or a little hazel tree, and they'll cut a bit of a branch off, and they'll just get the end of the branch and just start using it and soften it up and clean the teeth that way. So that was, again, another old method. And if you have the money and the coin to have salt in your diet, and salt has been collected for such an old time, there's always been places in, they knew the ability to boil seawater, and then from the boiling of the seawater, you'd end up with salt. So salt was always a thing, but they also knew about where to dig it up as well. But then they have to purify that salt, I believe. So they've always had the ability to use salt. So certainly with my toothache, I get a little bit of warm water, I put a good couple of teaspoons of salt in it, and I gargle it, because salt will kill the germs in your mouth. And it's one of those essential things you should always have in your house is salt. And I get sick to death of reading, articles and magazine articles saying, well, salt's bad for you, but it's not fundamentally. You need a bit of salt in your diet. But the best salt to have is sea salt. I actually bought some today by chance. And I just have a little pinch. When I have a glass of water, I put a little tiny bit of sea salt in my water in the morning, because it's got all those trace chemicals and all those trace vitamins you need in your diet. So salt isn't a bad thing for you, but too much salt is. But go for sea salt is the best salt you could have, because it's got way more vitamins than the standard salt we put on our food. And let's face it, if you're going for fish and chips is not the same without salt. But I don't like to have vinegar put on my chips, because they end up soggy. So, I just say put some salt on, no vinegar. I take my chips back. Oh, I've not had chips for ages. And then I put my own vinegar on. Well, in German, I think it's called... what's it called in German? I forget now. I know salts is salts. Essig is called in German. It's vinegar. And now the reason why I know that is because it was in the Dad's Army episode. If you don't know what Dad's Army is, 1960s, 70s comedy about the Home Guard, when they captured the U-boat Germans. Captain Mannering, was told to go and feed the Germans, and ordered Private Walker. Or Joe Walker, to go out and get some, chips. And then the captain of the I'm just imagining it now. It's so funny. So the captain of the U-boat said he doesn't want soggy chips. But quite interesting, because our Joseph Walker is also one of the American heroes when it comes to the Wild West. I'm not talking about fundamentally the Wild West as we know it when it comes to cowboys, but he was one of the early pioneers. It was a man called Joseph Walker, or Joe Walker, or Papa Joe, I think they got called as well, or Old Joe. I think Old Joe was his nickname, because he was quite a young man when he went fur trapping in around about 1830s. And then he kind of got lost in the wild when he got separated from the fur trappers, the company he was with. And you got to really give it to these, these Wild West pioneers like Jebediah Smith and Daniel Boone. What fascinating characters they were. And I recently watched a very good documentary series on Amazon Prime. I think it's called like Into the West or Into the Wild West, something like that. It just talks about all these pioneers who fundamentally discovered America, like Clark and the other guy who I can't remember at the moment. Clark and, oh God, I hate it when I can't think of something. But these characters, there was really proper men, and there's quite a few women as well did it, but mostly it was a male-dominated thing. But they were serious, proper individuals. There was one guy called, I think it was Kit Carson, or Colton, I think Kit Carson, and he was another incredible guy who pioneered some of the early ways to go to California. And again, he was another fascinating character of the Wild West, but more the early Wild West rather than what we often associate the Wild West with cowboys and Tombstone. Much early on that, so fascinating. And then last night, because I tried to go to bed early, about midnight, couldn't sleep, so I watched a bit of TV. Very recently watched a film on Channel 4 called Megan, with a 3 rather than an E, about this woman who starts having to look after her niece because her parents die, and she's like a robotics person working for a company and invents this robotic doll to look after her. That's a very good movie, but I won't give any spoilers away, so you have to go and watch it yourself. But last night I was looking on Prime thinking, I'll try to find something to watch for a bit because I was awake. And it's always good to have a bit of time off from content because I fundamentally live and breathe it all the time. And if I'm on my phone, I'll be thinking about videos, trying to answer comments. And yes, I do apologise. I've got tons of comments I need to reply to. I've just not had the chance in the last 3 or 4 days to actually go and reply to some of the comments. So hopefully in the next couple of days, I'm going to attempt to reply to a lot of comments because I think it's always courteous and good hospitality as a content creator to reply to comments. So I will do that, so bear with me. And then today when I'm looking at my emails, I've had a very nice email from DJI, the people that make the drones, wanting to sponsor a video. So they want to send me a drone for free. I'll give them a big shout out in one of our videos, and then we could use the drone in our videos. And then whenever I'm using drone footage, I'll just have to say, oh yeah, drone by DJI. Of course, you need to have a license, and you also need to have insurance, don't you, these days? But there's a guy I watch sometimes on YouTube. He's one of these auditors. I think it's DJ Audits. He's not bad, but some auditors get on my nerves a little bit because you can tell they're going out and they're trying to get into trouble or they're trying to upset people. And that's not always fundamentally good as a content creator, I don't think. I think they're just out to get trouble in videos where they, upset people, they go to a business and film over it and they come out, what are you doing? You're not allowed to do that. That's illegal, even though it's not illegal. And there's no prohibition of the flying zones. But DJ Audits is one of the good guys when it comes to audit channels. I thought about doing it myself, but I think I got enough to do. But if I did do some audit videos, I'd have to do it dressed as a Viking, wouldn't I? Without any weapons, of course, in case the police come along, which does happen quite a lot. But certainly these days, a lot of auditors would have got arrested 4 or 5 years back, but the police have now got to the point of understanding most of the time that it's not an illegal thing as long as you got your insurance. And of course, you don't have to hand your details over because you're not fundamentally breaking the law. Well, that water is lovely. Yes, so Bruce Dog says that Christchurch on the south coast, they are selling fish and chips for £27 a portion. Oh, good God, I think I need to sit down after that. Oh, I'd have a heart attack being a bit tight-fisted, wise with my money. £27? I mean, if you got 4 of you, that's going to be like 108 quid for 4 portions of fish and chips. That's ridiculous. I mean, and I was talking about this the other day with my neighbours. How if you go in Derby Centre, there isn't a fish and chip shop anymore, really. I mean, I can't really think of one. A proper traditional fish and chippy. There's a calf. This is one of these modern calves which sell fish and chips, but it's not like a fish and chippy. And I do love fish and chips. And of course, standing order or Wetherspoons is not bad because that's what £10.65 I think for a beer and fish and chips large portion. And I was in there last week and I kept on smelling fish and chips. It smelled so nice. But then there's a few good chippies around me, but I normally go to a place called Sussex Circus, which is, I've got to point the direction and give you the mileage. Oh, let's have a look. Where are we? It's about 3 miles in that way in a place called Chadderston. And it's like on a massive roundabout with all these shops around it. And I must say, really good. I think it's £10.60 for a most massive fish and the chips are so well done. And it's not too far away for me to go and get some fish and chips and come back with it, and they're still warm. So that's not too bad. But £27 for fish and chips just because you're on the coast, that's a ridiculous rip-off. But then again, I've always thought to myself that sometimes some people have just got more money than sense. Says the man with thousands of, well, not thousands, maybe hundreds of, probably not hundreds. Well, I've probably got 100 weapons in here if I took them all out. So yes, and we've got a comment here from Josh. He said, "Hi, where can I buy a good quality Gladius? Is the windlass one any good?" Let's have a think. Well, maybe if you go to something like one of the traditional blacksmith that makes blades. There used to be one in Sheffield, but I can't quite remember the name of it. So I got a couple of weapons by him, but so I don't know. I mean, where would you get a Gladius from? I mean, doesn't Paul Binns make one? I mean, it depends how much you want to spend, really. I mean, I think maybe if you look at Armour Class, they do combat blades. They're a Scottish company. I think they sell Roman equipment. If not, maybe contact some of the Roman groups. It's one thing I don't have in my collection is a Gladius. I do have somewhere a Roman knife, but I can't remember what I did with it. I saw it the other day as well, by chance. I'll have to think about that and I'll show you on camera. But I think there's a company in Sheffield, but it escapes me at the moment. One day it's going to come back to me when I'm not thinking about it, and I'll just remember their name because they made this. I've got a helmet here they made. Hang on, bear with me. So they made this Roman helmet, which is a Legionnaire's helmet, I think, and that's not a bad one. Although it's very heavy. I've worn it. It's got no lining either, but it does give you a headache. What I like about it, I love the handle because the Romans are so clever, so you could carry it on the march, and I love that touch. Having a little handle like that, it's just superb. But it is slightly heavy. I mean, it's a good fit on my head. It could do with a bit of padding in there, maybe a hat. But and it's got nice cheek plates. But and it's a slightly rusty. I need to give it a good. It's got a bit of rust there, you can see the browning stones, so it needs to be sprayed somewhere. I did have some spray, so it needs a bit of oil, it needs a bit of a clean up again, and then at some point I need to clean it all up, sort out the rust, and then polish the brass, because I think it's always nicer when you got brass on a Roman helmet, and that's a real nice one. But the problem with wearing Roman helmets is because they're really quite heavy actually, compared to a Viking helmet, they do tend to give you a headache. So the Romans must be really tough. And of course, I love the embossing here, which is quite unique. And I assume that's probably there for strength. And it would have been made out of two halves. And it's been, if you look at it, it's been welded together. So you can't quite see it, but you kind of just turn it around a bit. But yeah, it's not bad. I do love Roman stuff, and I think this is a Legionnaire's helmet from my understanding. And also like the washers because they've got decoration, so they thought about the decoration side of it. And they've got this little visor, which I assume is for protection, stop any blows maybe. And then I've got a little hook, which I'm not quite sure what that's for. I think it's to do with the mounting, when you can have something mounted on top, and it hooks into this. But can't quite remember. But it just need a bit of a clean up. Like a lot of my stuff, it all needs a bit of a clean up. And perhaps in some live streams, when I sort this Viking table out, I'll and get some of the equipment I need, I'll start cleaning up stuff on camera and treating it and polishing it back up. I need some Brasso for that. But yeah, it's nice, and I like the cheek plates. You can certainly see the influence later on that the Vikings and the Saxons have the influence of the cheek plates from the Roman period. These are more elaborate in design, whereas the Viking ones and the Saxon ones are a little bit more plainer and straighter. But again, it's just such a lovely thing. And then it's got a little loop for tying your strap. So you can put two leather straps on here or thonging just to tie it under your chin. So yeah, I do love a good Roman helmet. I do have a really massive Roman shield, which is just, really massive. But it's so important then you get a helmet. And compared to this one I made, you can just see, and you compare the two, that the cheek plates on this one are just way too short. Because at the time when I made it, when I was 16, I didn't really realise why cheek plates were so important. So the Romans were very clever. They made them quite long. So let's just put it back on my head again. And I love the fact it's got another little metal loop here. So you could also attach it to your equipment on the march. Because if you're marching, you don't fundamentally want to be wearing this all day. So you can attach it to your pack. And maybe in the future we'll invest in one of them. Or you could attach it to your boat. Or you could just hold it with the handle. And I just love that touch. Because that's just unique to the Roman period. And probably other ancient period as well. But if we put it back on the head again, you'll see that the cheek plate is well longer than where my chin is. So it's got that extra protection. And when you got it fastened together with a nice leather thong, not a modern thong, of course, because that'd be a bit rude and definitely not right. It sits well, but it just needs some kind of a lining. You could have a felt lining inside because felt was a thing and been around for ever since we learned how to, to produce wool. Or you could be wearing a Roman hat underneath it. But certainly, I've worn this a few times, and it does give you a headache. So take some paracetamol beforehand. And of course, the Romans didn't really have them. But they did know about various plants and barks, which will do the same effect as aspirin and get rid of your headache. So yeah, so it's got that nice touch. And I do agree, cheek plates on Roman helmets and Greek helmets and ancient helmets are just so elaborate. And again, with the helmet, you got it lined on the outside on the cheek plate with brass, because I think it's very important that you didn't have a sharp edge. And again, it's slightly embossed and raised up, so it's not flat. And that's to give it strength as well, because it's important that it's got strength. The embossing area is quite important, which forms a part of the hinge mechanism. And the hinge mechanism is a part of the helmet, so it's not an attached hinge like a lot of the Viking and the Saxon helmets. The hinge would be a separate piece attached to the helmet. This one is actually incorporated into the design of the cheek plate. And again, they've also gone along with the brass and they've chiselled a line or a few lines in it, A, to give it strength, but also give it that individuality, because, it was about the design. So it's not just practical, it's also important the way it looked as well. And of course, now I take it off, I've got bad helmet hair, which has been a long thing ever since we've been wearing helmets. And it's also got really proper rivets as well. A lot of modern helmets you buy will have just a modern rivet, and they're just not good enough. So, yeah, so it's really nice. But if I can remember the name of the blacksmith who made it, it's an army company that makes armour, generally, more the later period stuff. But they do make Roman stuff. And they do make, I think they make gladius and Roman knives and swords. And just here, look, I've got a pilum. So you're talking about Roman spears. I got a pilum as well. This is one that Graham's left round here, or take here. Because these generally had one use. Because they're designed to be thrown in the battle. But as soon as it hits the shield, it bends over and it'll go through the shield, because that would penetrate. And I'd love to actually get a few more of these made to demonstrate on camera, because if I use this one, it's just going to bend this, because this shaft here is made from a very soft iron. It's purposely designed to go through a shield and then bend, because what happens, you got a shield, so, there's your shield, and the pilum goes through it, and it bends, because the iron's soft. But now you can't use the shield, because you've got a blooming big spear, or pilum, or javelin, in this case. Well, it's a pilum, so it's a Roman equivalent of the early period. It's a bit like an Anglo-Saxon angon, which is another thing I don't have in my collection so far. I know Take here has got an excellent angon, and the angon is just the later version of this. So you may have carried 2 or 3 of these, but I'd love to get a few more. And again, this has been properly riveted on. It's a real nice reconstruction of one. And originally, you may have had mine in my ceiling. You probably would have had a mount at the end, but at some point the mount's come off. And again, these would have been mass produced. It's got a nice mounting here as well. So this probably would have been made from a round tube and not square. but the rivets are what keep it together. And the idea of it bending is take the enemy shield out, because if you take the Celtic shield out of the gameplay, and some of the Celtic shields were quite big, they can't use a shield, and now they're a massive target and will get taken out by the next Roman guy next to him, whether he's spearing him or going to throw one of these through his body. So these are pretty lethal, I must say. And this is a short one, but I just wouldn't want to use it as a target because it will bend, and then I'm going to have to think about rebend it back. So you do have to think about your kit. And then, of course, you have rectangular shields as well. And the Vikings also use these, but more the Hiberno Norse Vikings from Scotland. And this one I made many years ago. It's just made from a bit of plyboard, and it's got a typical Viking boss. It's slightly too big, I reckon. But the only problem with this, when I made it, I put the handle up the wrong way around. It should be vertical and not horizontal, because I should be hold it this way. So I have to hold it this way, and it's awkward. It don't feel right. So if the handle was actually vertical, so it's going to be another job for another day, and perhaps we'll demonstrate this on camera. I'll grind it off, get some new nails, because these are riveted on with nails, and then I just made a rivet from a nail head. So we'll put it back on correctly and finish it off, and maybe put a bit of leather on the back first just to tie it over. But again, another really nice, interesting shield. But because it's the wrong way around, it's very awkward to use. If it was vertical like this with a handle, it's going to be so much easier to use because I can push it into somebody's face. But because of the way I made it, and I made a mistake, which you do make mistakes when you make kit. And this is probably 20 years old. It's just one of those many projects I've put together and never quite finished. And the handle would have been off a Viking shield at some point, and it's got a bit of dog chew and a bit of wood just to give it that extra grip and thickness to it. So again, going to be another project for another day. Eventually, I'll put that together and finish that. But maybe that will be for another video on the channel. And I do love a rectangular shield. I think they're fantastic in design, and it's more of a show one because of the leather, but it does look nice. I'm sure you agree. But I do think the boss is probably slightly oversized. I think if I can make a handmade boss for it and not use and take this boss off and put it on a round shield, that would be better, because I do have 3 or 4 round shields and never finished off. I need to get some bosses for, but I probably got the bosses. But over time, these get really badly dented to the point where it will collapse and it will be biting on the back of your hand. But you can heat them up on a forge with a torch, or even in your oven, and we'll re-knock them back out again if you've got the equipment. So this one is a very old boss, and it's just got to the point where it's been caved in with all these hits. And at some point in the past, I've heated it back up on my forge, and I put it on a circular bit of wood with a dish in it, and I've knocked it back out again. So yeah, I'll have to think about where you can get a Gladius. If I can think of the armory, and I think they're either based in Leeds or they're based in Sheffield. It might actually be based in Leeds, but so you type in Leeds, and no, but am I thinking of and I think I'm thinking of the Leeds Army Museum. So it may be from Sheffield, but I just can't at the moment, and I've been trying to think of it for a while. I think it might be something to do with white. It's a White Oak Armories, something like that. It'll come back to me. I've probably got it written down somewhere in a book. So yeah, so I will bear that in mind, and if I can find you one or recommend somewhere to get one, then I certainly will do. But of course, you could go to one of the reenactment fairs. The next one will be in October, and then you're going to go. I think they're normally around Coventry or around Bromwich area. And I'm hoping this year I'm going to go to one in October and buy a few things. So again, I'm going to gradually get together a list of good traders which I can recommend, because I don't want to recommend some of the not so good traders like Grimfrost, because it's just very generic and it's very mass-produced stuff, and it's not so good. It's great for the beginner, but when you're buying a Viking tunic and it's made from cotton, for me that's a massive no-no, really, because they didn't have cotton, and some of the stuff from Grimfrost isn't authentic. It looks good, but go out your way and spend good money, or even make it yourself. And then Bruce Dog says plastic tables and chairs and the restaurant / look stuffy and hot behind glass on the hot sunny day. Well, yes, if you're going to pay £27 for a portion of fish and chips, you want to go to somewhere that's really nice and clean, not stuffy, and certainly not what you said and get plastic chairs. You want a proper wooden chair and a decent table at that price. But then again, I've heard places down south and on the coast that are charging you even more than that, £30, £40 for a portion of fish and chips. But I think you got to be a little bit, tapped in the head without being too, controversial to pay that money in the first place. I mean, you may as, if you go to the coast, you may as well just go to a Wetherspoons, really, and get good beer and get your fish and chips at a reasonable price. But a lot of people think, well, Wetherspoons, it's one price at all venues, but it's not, because some of the places are cheaper. Now, I can do a sample of this, because there's 2 Wetherspoons in Derby Centre, 3 miles in this direction. You got the Standing Order, where I used to work, and you got the Badminton Arms, which is a little bit rougher, and the clientele is little bit more not so posh as Standing Order. The Standing Orders are a lot bigger, and you get a lot of young people, and you get a lot of couples and families. Where Badminton Arms is a different sort of clientele. So for the beer I had today, I paid £1.99 for a pint of it was called Stairway to Heaven. Very nice pint. I really enjoyed it. But if you go to the other Wetherspoons, it's £2.68. And then sometimes, and I do think this is correct, some of the food in Badminton Arms is cheaper than the one in Standing Order. So there can be a bit of a difference between the two. So do make sure when you go to Wetherspoons, go to the one that's cheaper, because you get just as good a service, if not better, at the cheaper Standing Orders, or I call it Standing Orders, that's what I used to work at, the cheaper Wetherspoons. So let's go back to your comments again. Yeah, it says, Josh says, yes, let me know. Yeah, I think it's called, if you go to Google, type in White Rose Armoury. I think it's called White Rose Armoury. So I'm thinking about it, and it's in my brain somewhere. And I think they're still going. So yeah, so when you finish the live stream, it won't be too long from that, type in White Rose Armoury and have a look at them, see if whether they're still going. Yeah, I think that's them. I think they're from Sheffield, if I remember. That rings a bell. White Rose Armoury. It's funny how I remember things at the time. So yeah. Yeah, I think that's them. That rings a bell to me. I'm trying to think of all, because I think at some point Paul Binns had a guy that used to work for him, and he started his own blade company making blades, because he learnt the skill with Paul Binns. But I don't know his name either, or what company he started. And there's certainly, I do see quite a few blacksmiths online, but it depends what you want, whether you want a combat blade or whether you want a nice sharp one. And then certainly check out Armour Class and have a look whether they've got any. I've not really been on their website for a while, because I keep looking, and there's 2 or 3 nice, Viking and Saxon swords I really do want to buy. And no doubt they've probably gone up in money, because everything's gone up in money. Yeah, so try White Rose Armoury and let me know. Yeah, and then Josh says cheap plates is one of my favourite parts of a home. Well, I definitely agree with you. And having a good, decent, cheap plate makes a difference. And then Josh says, looks like a piece of toffee. And what does? Oh, you mean the shield? Oh, well, I suppose it's that natural, tan leather. It's a natural dye colour, vegetable tan. So it's good quality leather and it's authentic. And you do get some amazing colours when it comes to leather. So it does look a bit like toffee, I agree. But I wouldn't want to eat it. It would be a bit tough. But if you're starving to death, you can eat leather. And people have done. I mean, people have been caught in the wilds of America. And, they've ate the shoes and the belts and all the leather after they ate the horse. And White Wool. No, I think it's called White Rose Armoury, if I remember. And then Whitewell, is that another armory? Because there's probably loads of manufacturers and blacksmiths and bladesmiths out there, just that we don't often hear of them. And then Josh says, he's near Blackpool, so that could be wrong. Yeah, if there's a guy called Whitewell, it's definitely not him. It's something like White Rose Armory, and I'm fairly certain they're from Sheffield. And I think I've got a couple of pieces from him, including that helmet I've shown earlier. And then we've got a comment here from Jack Bartholomew, says, you said standing order. Are you from Southampton? No, I'm from Derby. But we have a place, Wetherspoons in Derby called Standing Order. It's a really massive old bank and quite big. It's also haunted as well. There's two ghosts. There's one in the cellar because they've got this scary corridor where people don't like to go. And then on the stairs up to the offices on the front of the building, they said people have seen a ghost on the stairs. And there is a bit of an atmosphere. And I think you're right. I think there is more than one standing order when it comes to Wetherspoon pubs. And then Jack says, we have a standing order in Southampton. Perhaps it's just got the same name. Yes, it has. I've definitely seen that one in Southampton in the magazine. Because I thought at the time, I didn't know there's another one. So perhaps it's, perhaps there's more than two. I don't know. Perhaps it's a common name for massive Wetherspoons where you got a lot of room to stand, which it does. It's a really massive place. Like I said, it used to be a Victorian bank back in the day. I can just remember when it used to be a bank in the 90s before it got converted over. And then Josh, yes, that's it. It says Greek, Roman, World War I, White Rose. So there you go. So are they still going then? Because I'll have to try to remember that and write it down, and then we could look to buy some of their lovely goods in the future. Because I do think it's always important to buy British when you can. And then Josh says, I can't see their shop, so I'd have to email them. Yeah, I think back in the day, it was normally you had to email the guy from White Rose. And I don't think he had a shop or a website, so he used to just make things specifically. I think he makes a lot of armour for people, so he's more of an armour maker. But I know certainly in the past, TK used to buy things from him and have things made, because TK used to go around the education system in the 90s, which is why he ended up with so much kit, which is why I ended up buying a lot of kit, because he tried to reduce some of the stuff he's got. And I really love to buy some more stuff off him, because I got money burning in my pocket at some point soon. So I'm saving up to buy more kit, and I'm definitely trying to get a Romano-British impression going. And then Jack Bartholomew says, I'm new to the channel. Good to see somebody doing something they are passionate about. Well, yeah, it's so important that we have a passion for history and we have a passion for what we do. And we're coming up to our 8th birthday on the 10th of July. So we've been around a little bit, but it's nice to see that the channel is growing. We're getting good views. Our subscription base is growing, because that's what you want as a content creator. And we get a lot of really nice and decent comments from people. And it's all about, entertaining people. Also, on the other hand, it's also about educating, but it's not about boring people to death. It's about being human and being who we are and being genuine people, which I think our videos are very genuine in the long format. And we used to have a host called Eggle who passed away in 2023. So it's about remembering Eggle and carrying Eggle's legacy on. And at some point, if the future wife ever joins the channel, then we'll probably create a new thing for the channel and do our own thing. So, yeah. So, and then Bruce Dog says, from Southampton also. So what are the chances of that? And then Bruce Dog says, do. And then Jack says, is it all ages of history? Are you interested? Oh, yes, very much so. I mean, I've reenacted history for nearly 30 years. I've done everything from the Bronze Age, I've done World War, I've done the Iron Age, I've done a little bit of Roman, a bit of Celt. I've done a lot of Viking and Anglo-Saxon stuff. I've tried a little bit of later medieval, but never really got into it too much. But we will be introducing that to the channel, because I can exclusively say to you that my friend Jim, who I've known for many, many years, I'm actually responsible for him being married and having children. He's going to join the channel at some point soon, and he does 14th and 15th century, dressed as an armoured knight. I've done a little bit of World War II. I tried Napoleon a couple of times when I've been invited. So I've done a lot of things. I never really tried the English Civil War too much. Wouldn't mind trying that, being a pikeman. I'd like to get into World War II a little bit more and dressed as a Tommy. So, yeah, so it's all about all periods of history, including ancient history, because I do love the Greek and the, stuff, and the Macedonian pikes or, spearmen were legendary, weren't they? And I certainly, because I'm also a war gamer, I certainly had a Macedonian army back in the day, and, there was just legendary, their forces. So, yeah, we are going to gradually introduce a lot of different periods of history. And then gradually over the next year or two, we're going to start travelling to castles and go to venues and places, go to reenactments, meet lots of really cool reenactors and have them on camera as well. And just take the channel forward. But it's also, I also do things like I talk about mental health. It's a new thing on the channel, because it's all right, making daft short videos on TikTok and put them on here, or telling stories. But we tell a lot of folk tales from history as well. It's gradually I'm going all over the world when it comes to the origin of the stories and covering them. But it's also important to talk about some days the bigger things in life. So yeah, and then I'm probably also going to add at some point wargaming to the channel, and I certainly want to go down the route of covering prepping as well in the modern world, but also relate it to the medieval times, which is what mostly we cover. Which is why you see, a lot of swords, and we have, there's swords all over the place. It's a Norwegian Norse single-edged blade, and then we have a Langsats, or a long knife from Gotland. And I've got a massive pile of weapons down here, which is getting more every year. I get more and more, and I keep investing, or I keep making them. So we also at the moment introducing crafting to the channel as well, which is the new feature. So just go back to some of your comments. Yeah, and don't forget to like the video as well. It's always really does help the channel. And if you can share our long format videos, it really would help the channel to grow. Because I'm trying to get back to being monetized again. Because it does help to actually make an income from what you're doing. Because this is my full-time job, fundamentally. But I'm not making any money from it. And because the money I'm going to make is going to be reinvested back into more kit, into more history, and then to go into places. And also different countries. So, so we are planning to cover different periods of history, because I think it's quite important that we, we'll go a little bit wider and we introduce different things. And between me and my reenactment friends, we know a lot of reenactors. In fact, my friend Jim knows a guy from History Squad. I think his name is John Hicks, I think. So perhaps, we could do a collab with him. And then Jack Ptolemy says, my name is Ancient Macedonian Egyptian, so I've always had a passion for history. Well, that's such a cool surname. It really is. And it's a very old word as well. And of course, etymology and understanding language is so important to understanding our heritage, which is another aspect of the channel. It's about respecting and remembering our heritage and our ancestors. And a lot of the time, you'll see me dressed as a Norse warrior. Is that I just don't do it all the time, and I've not been doing any filming today, which is why I'm in my modern clothes. But I am wearing two Thor's hammers. And then Jack says the Ptolemaic dynasty were the longest and the last rulers of Egypt. Well, yes, of course. And of course, Egyptian history is vastly incredible and stunning, really, when you think about the jewelry, the weaponry, and all the construction they made, the pyramids. And I'd really love to go to Egypt and take you guys on some videos to the pyramids and some of the other places in Egypt, because people always go to the pyramids, but there's so many places of ancient Egypt, and travel down the Nile. I would love to do that as well, and I will do at some point in the future. And then Jack says, with a name like that, I've always been interested in history. I hardly had a choice, laughs out loud. Well, yes, but you're honouring your name by being interested in history. Sorry, I'm a bit tired today. I didn't get much sleep last night. And then Brad says, did you know anything about Viking bows? Yeah, I know a little bit. I've got one which I attempted to make many years ago, but it's not quite got to the stage yet where it's bendable. So it needs a bit more work. This is made from ash. So it wants more shaving, more spoke shaving down it. And it's quite difficult to get to the stage where you can bend it. If I stop bending it, it'll probably get to the stage where it'll break. So it does need quite a bit more material to come off it. And it's not the straightest of bows in the world. And it's just about 6 foot, maybe 6'2". So, yeah, a bit more work. And it's not brilliantly straight. It's what I had to work with at the time. But I do want to go and actually buy a good English longbow. Even if it costs me quite a bit of money, I do want to buy one, add one to the channel. And they do say you can never let anybody else use your bow. But whether that's a myth, I don't know. Because fundamentally, when you're pulling a bow, it's used to your muscles and not somebody else's. But I think that's a bit of a myth around bows. And maybe in the future, we'll have a think about making some, some arrow shafts and make some arrow heads and having a go, doing some fletching. And I know Tirk here has 3 or 4 English longbows. So if he ever wants to flog one to me, I'd be more than interested to give me some cash. And they do retain money. I mean, people, I see them online second-hand, £300-400 for both, just for a second-hand one. So I hate to imagine how much you'd be paying. I bet you'd be paying, £500 to £800 easily for a brand new, handmade bow. But I did see a video on TikTok where a guy owns a workshop where you can go for the weekend and you end up with a handmade bow you made yourself, and it's a bow working workshop. But I'd love to know how much it actually costs to go and do the event and go for the weekend. And I think it's probably down south in the New Forest, but I may be mistaken. And I did have a little bit of a chat with the guy. And then the guy that does all the flint napping on TikTok, Will Lloyd, he also does lessons and will teach you how to flint nap. So again, I'd love to go down, do a weekend course with him, film a bit of content as well for the channel and learn how to flint nap. And then, go to some fields and find all the flint I could take and find and bring it back with me. And then we could make some flint arrowheads, maybe some axe heads, and, get more into that period of history as well. And then Bruce Dog says, I read somewhere that there's a documented Viking battle where a type of longbow was used to kill an opposition warlord. Well, that sort of thing and archers individually targeting high-ranking people has been done ever since we learnt the ability to target people. Which is why in the American Civil War, you find a lot of the officers took the bars and stripes off, and the sergeants would take the bars, the sergeant stripes off, because it makes you a target. So, and of course, in those period of history, it was classed as ungentlemanly warfare. You don't target officers. And certainly when it came to the American Civil War, if you was a sharpshooter, and most sharpshooters wore a green uniform, just think of sharp but wearing all green. I have quite a few friends in the 1st United States Sharpshooters Regiment in the UK. And if they were captured by the Confederates, they'll just kill them straight away and put them to death, because they saw it as ungentlemanly warfare. Because the sharpshooter was designed to take out the officers and the NCOs and anybody of high rank, and that was important to a regiment, because regiments don't run without corporal sergeants, first sergeants, staff sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and colonels. So, the sharpshooters were developed to take out these individuals in the battle. But then the Confederacy also did the same thing. Yeah, then Brad says it will take a few days to make a real English longbow from a tree branch. So it's not going to be cheap. But if you're good at it, you could sell them for a lot of money. Yes, I mean, half the difficulty when it comes to a longbow is actually sourcing the wood. and especially if you're going to make it out of yew, because there's so little yew left which are have long enough lengths without knots in that you could chop down to make a longbow. And you find a lot of it in churchyards, but churches will not let you go and chop down a massive branch of a yew tree. So a lot of English longbows have to be made out of ash, and certainly a lot of it would be imported from Europe, because a lot of the ash dieback in the UK, in lots of the regions of the UK, has highly affected that market. But then again, if you're going to a course to make an actual bow, I'd imagine you'd just have a wooden stave ready to go, and they would have loads of them, stacked up. And then, so you won't be actually chopping the tree down and, splitting it in half and quartering it, or even into eight, because it's big enough and thick enough. So that'll be all ready for you. So you're just doing the last stages of actually making the bow, but not sourcing the material, which is how it's fundamentally done. And of course, you've got to get your wooden stave, and you've got to have the ability to store it, to dry it naturally, and not force dry it. Because if you force dry it, whether it's in the sun or in a some place which is heated, you're going to end up cracking the wood if you're not careful, and ruining that wooden stave. So there is really an art form when it comes to making a bow, and there's some really good videos out there that demonstrate and show this. And then Brad says you can buy ready chosen logs for bows. You just have to debark it, then take hours shaping it. Well, yeah, I mean, but generally, if you're making a bow, you have a much thicker piece of wood, 8-12 inches, and you're going to get quite a few staves out of it, fundamentally so, rather than just doing it from one piece. But you can do it from one piece. I mean, for instance, this one's made from just one piece of ash, which would have been about 4 inches, maybe a bit less, 3 inches. But then again, you also want a bit of the heartwood on one side and a bit of the outer wood on the other, because that's what gives it this strength to stretch. But there is an art form. I maybe it's slightly too low, but it's taller than me, so it's got to be 6'1", 6'2". You can't quite see it really if I stand there. So, but it's not the perfect shape, and it's slightly bent. But I could heat it on a fire to knock out the bends and the kinks if need be, which is one method of doing that. Or you could steam it. If you make a big steaming box, you go and get a load of what you call it, industrial shipping plywood, which has got a bit of waterproof resistant, and make a steaming box. And normally what you do, you get a wallpaper strip it and you attach one of them to it. It's a modern way of making a wood steamer. But certainly I could probably heat up this over a fire gently and dekink it gradually. But it's just been there for years. It's another unfinished project of mine. I have a few of them. And then Bruce Dog says, have you ever considered doing talks for money before? Well, no, not really. I mean, a lot of people do go around the talk scene, or go to venues and events and do charge good money for it. But it's not something I've ever really thought about. I'm just not organised enough, to be fair. I mean, I've got too many things going around in my house. I've got too many projects on the go. But I think it would be quite cool. I mean, I thought about, in the past, becoming a stand-up comedian. If I could learn how to do it and, actually shadow somebody for a while, because I think I'd be quite funny doing that. And perhaps I could do it just as a Viking, because we certainly got a stand-up place in Derby, but then it takes you an awful long time to get anywhere established as a stand-up comedian in the UK. It takes years and years and years. And then Brad says, did you manage to find the heart wood and the outside wood okay? That would worry me if I've not done it if I've not done it right. Yeah, well, you can always tell the difference between heartwood, and you can also tell the difference between the outer wood, because it's slightly, I think the heartwood is harder than the outer wood, so you can also tell the difference when you work at it, but you can generally see the line. It's just that's just faded so much over the years. And then Bruce Dog says, I think you could do it if you wanted to. Well, yeah, maybe in the future I'll think about, because I could certainly go on stage and talk about inspiration and being aspiring people. So perhaps in the future, if anybody wants to send me an invite, I could think about doing it. And and often in life I just bullshit my way through. To be fair, so I don't really need a massive plan, or I could just bullshit my way through a speech for half an hour. I think probably because I know a little bit about everything. And then Brad said you could do a history tour around a castle. Well, if you ever look at the Tower of London, and there's some very good videos of some of these ex-soldiers who work and live there, and there's some really good tour guides. I mean, there's one guy I've seen some videos from, and he's hilarious. He really is. He's so funny when he gives a tour because he incorporates the audience and he has a bit of a laugh and a joke, and he always makes fun about Marines and the RAF guys. If I ever find one of those videos again, I'll share it because that video, the videos I've seen of that guy and a few of the others, tour guides from the Tower of London, are just hilarious because they've just done it so much every day, doing the tour every day in and day out. So they just learn what's funny. And those videos are really good to learn from when it comes to being funny on camera or doing a tour. And certainly back in the day when Richard Felix, the guy from Most Haunted, was doing ghost tours and Viking tours and medieval tours. I did a little bit of work. I used to dress as a ghost, but I didn't do it for too long because Richard Felix was so tight with the money. And I was doing it through Eggle because Eggle used to work for him. So I got a little bit fed up of being shafted all the time, which is a phrase for not being paid right or not being paid. And I don't do things for nothing. Never volunteer and never work for free is my motto in life. And then Bruce Dog says you could try doing a talk in the old people's home, maybe. Some of them would remember the Vikings. Well, you never know. But old people love history. And certainly, I do love to sing as well. The other day, so the other week, or last week, I put a comment out on my Facebook saying, wow, I've had 1 million views in 48 hours. What a surprise. And then my friend Jim, a guy called Jim Darlington, sent me a message saying, was that a few weeks back? I sent him a message saying, at some point we need to do a collab because he's got a small YouTube channel and he goes on Twitch a lot doing gaming, heading towards 1,000 followers on Twitch, which is well done. It takes a lot, it takes a lot to get that many followers in the gaming circuit. But he does 14th century and 15th century reenacting dress as a knight. So I said to him, it'll be really good actually, get you along. We could do some combat videos, Viking, or Norse warrior versus a knight. So he made a comment on my video and he said, we've got to talk about this collab. We're going to do it. And I said, yeah. Then I texted him my new mobile number and he rung me up last Friday and said, I'm going down my local pub. He lives in a village about 8 to 10 miles in that direction. I'm not saying where. And the pub's got the word king in it. That's what I'm going to say. So I said, I'm going down my pub for a few beers tonight. Why don't you pop along? So I said, all right. I said, what time are you going down? Send me a text. He phoned me up and said, I'll be down there at 7 o'clock. So I said, all right, I just need about half an hour. I'll be down there at 7:30. So I drove into the village, not far away, in my big 4x4. I got a Volvo because as a reenactor, you always buy a vehicle which relates to your hobby. Because as a reenactor, you always got tents, you always got tent poles, and you guarantee you always arrange a garage around reenactment, and your house is arranged around reenactment. And at least once a year you go on holiday, which is a reenactment holiday. So everything you do as a reenactor relates to reenactment in one form or shape. So, so cool, come down. So I went down. I'm not seen Jim for about 8 years because I've been very silent to the world and I kind of disappeared off the face of the earth because I was caring for my dad. I couldn't get out of the house. So I kind of just disappeared off Facebook. Some people said, well, what's happened to Andy, my real name? And some people saying, has he died? But people not heard from me for many years. And so I went along and it was like with 8 years had never gone past. It was like the last time we hung out, and you could always tell a sign of a good friendship when you meet somebody for the first time in 8 years, and it's like 8 years hasn't gone past at all. And it was like last week was the last time I saw him, and he often talks about me because he told us the story, and I'll tell it to you now. We went to a event for the American Civil War Society because at the time I was running a regiment, or trying to get this regiment going, called the 14th Brooklyn, which I talked about before on the live streams. And this was before, this is when I could get out, when my dad wasn't too bad with his Alzheimer's and dementia, and I could leave him alone for the weekend. So we were going away, doing battles, and I went to a place in Hull. I think it was Easton Park in Hull. I think that's the name of it. And Bill was there, and there was this very nice woman on this sharpshooters camp called Sarah. And Jay, or Jim, or Jamie, he often changes it. He said, Andy, he said that woman over there. He said, oh yeah. He said, I'm going to marry her one day. I said, all right. I kind of laughed, joked. Of course, he's now married this woman. It's now got kids, and he often says, "Oh, it's my fault. It's Andy's fault." So yeah, so it's great to know that throughout that whole period, and the regiment collapsed because I couldn't get enough people to join back in the day, and it really got to a point where it was making my reenactment life miserable because I'm trying to run a regiment. I can't get people to join up. I don't have enough people to join up. I got to keep a certain amount of people going to each event, and the guys I had were really good, but a lot of them were loose-ended people, so they weren't massively serious into it, and they couldn't even get the live sorted. So it made it a little bit unhappy for me in the old reenactment scene. I just got to the point where I think in 2016 I said I just had enough. I've had enough of trying to run a regiment. There wasn't enough support from the society. You needed 10 people on the books to be a regiment. We had it at one point, but then some people left and some people couldn't commit to it. So it just became quite difficult. So at least out of all that, something really positive came about. And it was really great last Friday when we met up and we were talking about World War II, and we were talking about the channel and wants to come on and get involved. We're talking about all the time we went out drinking, because a lot of the regiments I used to hang about with were all very well known for liking a beer. And I think Jim put it in a really good way. He says, actually, we're not reenactors, we're drinkers who just have a reenactment problem. And that's what reenactment is about. It's about getting together, for a weekend, Friday to Sunday night. Some days it will be Friday to Monday on a bank holiday weekend. And you're fundamentally there for the socialising, for the beer in the evening, for, invading pubs. We've even been nightclubbing, at reenactment events and taken over nightclubs in a few occasions. That was fun, especially when like 500 of you turn up, and and the bouncers just get moved. Bouncer, just move the bouncer along, put him over there, just invade the nightclub, have a right good time. So yeah, and I love that because it is fundamentally a social gathering. Just like in the daytime, we just like to dress up in fancy clothes, and you do meet some of the most amazing people. And we lost so many amazing reenactors over the year because a lot of the original first generation from the 60s and 70s are all getting really quite old now and can't do it. So it's sad to see that we're losing that. So it's very important as reenactors that we recruit new people. And then last Friday, I met a new guy I never met before called Callum. He's just starting his reenactment career. So I shook his hand and said, well done, son. You're 35. You're going to have a right good laugh for the next 30 years. So that's also wonderful. So it's also important as a reenactment sense to, recruit younger people. And if you ever thought about getting into reenactment, I do urge you to get into it. I mean, the American Civil War Society has been and will be my home, but I also like the medieval period as well. And you're going to make friends for life, you really do. And I think that shows the strength of a friendship, the fact that I'm not seeing my friend for 8 years until last Friday. And it's like 8 years have never passed. And his wife was saying, and Jim's over the moon. I've never seen him so happy because you're coming out and you're meeting his old friend, me. So yeah, that's been wonderful. And I love the guy to bits. But anyway, on that point, you know, I'm going to say goodbye because I've got to get my dinner, and it's nearly been 1.5 hours. I was only planning to do an hour, and I'd love to stay a bit longer, but I've got to get some food, and I've got to think about winding down for the night, relaxing a bit, maybe watching a bit of TV, listen to some music, do a bit of tidying up. I've got some pots to wash. I've got some clothes in the washing machine to take out if they rinse properly. So yeah, I'm always on the go, always busy. Then tomorrow, another day on the channel, start putting some more videos out. I've got to try to edit a few more shorts videos rather than just relying on making videos from CapCut, which is okay. Some of those videos are okay, but they're not the best videos in the world. Well, yeah, been another entertaining and lovely live stream, and I do love hanging out, but it does get to you if I'm standing on my feet for 90 minutes or 2-3 hours. I tell you what, it's good exercise though, so I do need it because I put too much weight on in the last few months because I've just been eating such lovely food. So I need to get out a bit more, lose a bit of weight, and get a little bit fitter. I'm trying to do it through wearing my chainmail. I've got this mission where I'm wearing chainmail 2 or 3 times a week just to try to burn off the weight, and it does. Wearing chainmail. And Bruce Dog said, just got a bowl of granola. Oh, I love granola. I really do. But I think you're a bit like me. I never have it in the morning. I always have cereal when I do have it at night time. And it's funny that, isn't it? But I think that some days when you're just hungry and you can't be bothered to cook a steak or cook a meal, I just think, well, you know, toast or just go and get a bowl of granola. And I do love it. I love the granola. And I don't go for anything fancy. I just normally get the home brands from Lidl or Aldi. But they're quite nice. They've got a tropical one and they've got more of a raisiny, nutty one. But then I do like it with a bit of cream as well. We'll just get to the 1 hour 30 minutes mark. Then I'm going. I'm going to disappear. But yeah. And then Bruce Dog says, I mix granola and porridge in the morning. Laughs out loud. Yup. I buy it from Lidl. Yeah, it's either like an orange packet or a purple packet, if I recall. And if I leave it out too long and it goes a bit stale, I normally just feed it to the birds because, you know, they quite like it. It's got all that cereal thing. And I do love a bit of porridge as well because porridge is such an old thing and so good for you. And normally I have a little bit of honey in my porridge. Not have sugar. Sugar's bad for you. Have a bit of honey. And it just really improves. Or a bit of jam. Some days I have a bit of strawberry jam as well in my porridge. It just breaks that taste up. But I love it when you make porridge and you get all that lovely watery residue on the top. Oh, I think that's the best part of porridge. And, you know, it's a cold night. Then, yeah. And then Bruce Dog says, granola tropical. Yeah, that's what I normally get. That's in a purple packet, I think, or kind of a purplish packet. And then their chocolate granola is nice. I've not tried that, so I may have to try some of that. But I don't have cereal often. If I have a bowl of cereal once a week of granola, that's normally an average. And then I normally have porridge in the morning. I don't often have porridge at night, but I do love my porridge. Perhaps I should have it every day. It might fill me up and stop me from snacking on biscuits. This is not good for you. Ah, that's good. I've got my water for the day. I'll probably have another glass in a minute. And take it upstairs with me. Because I'm currently downstairs. This used to be the dining room, but it's now the Viking room. Because I think every Norse warrior should have a Viking room. It makes sense, doesn't it? But if you've got any suggestions for the next live stream, do let me know in the comments. I always welcome your suggestions of live stream, what to talk about. Maybe we'll do a weapons reveal. Maybe we may do a storytelling live stream. But I love these unplanned live streams, but I am gradually trying to plan them a little bit more. And hopefully, if I'm not tired tomorrow, I'll do another one tomorrow night, which is when I plan to do one, which will be Woden's Day. Perhaps we could talk about Woden and Odin. Yes. And then Bruce Dog, yesterday I brought a bar of Dubai chocolate to try it. What was it like, the chocolate from Dubai? Was it expensive? I'd imagine Dubai chocolate will be like gold plated or with flakes of gold in it. And that's another place I'd really love to go, is Dubai. And it's quite amazing. I keep seeing videos about this project called The Line, which they're building across, I think, Saudi Arabia. It's going to be like a city and it's going to be 100 miles long. I mean, that's going to be fantastic. I mean, I might even tempted to move there or live there for a bit. I think that'll be a fantastic experience. And it's amazing some of these Arab countries are building such wonderful structures and projects. You mean, changing the desert and making it into a green desert. I mean, ain't that a marvelous and amazing thing? Yes, so thank you very much for liking the live stream. Thank you for all the lovely comments. It really does help. And of course, it does help to get to 3,000 hours of watch time. When we get to 3,000, in theory, I think we could have super chats and we could also recommend the merchandise. I am still working on the merchandise shop, but because I made one and I got the origin country one, I've got to start all over again. I've just been too busy. So that will be coming some point soon. Just bear with me because it'll be open when I start asking people to go and check out our merch in a subtle way. And until we meet again, I love you guys to bits. Oh yeah, Bruce Dog, it's green in the middle, so the pistachio nuts cost £7.50. Oh, I love pistachio nuts. I mean, look, I love pistachio ice cream. Oh, that's to die for. I mean, I can get a packet of pistachio nuts and just eat them all night long, really. And it's very nice with a bit of chocolate. Oh, it's such a lovely taste, isn't it? Pistachio nuts. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you, guys. You've been awesome again. And again, more videos tomorrow. I filmed the latest video today about mental health. And I'm also going to be filming a video covering Norse paganism. This is my keywords to use. So you can see a little bit behind the scenes. So, yeah, I'm trying to get a little bit more organised in the videos, especially in some more videos where I got something actually to talk about and cover all these key words. And then I was wondering what blot ceremony was, but that's the blood ceremony, isn't it? So I had to remind myself what that was. And then on the other side, it just talks about the Saxon names for fuller or a graph. That's a trench or a groove. You got a dick in Saxon, which is a ditch or a tunnel. Skiatadan, or that's it's the ditch or part of the sword. And then you got the Grafen Thornsrud, a groove in the blade. It's a Saxon phrase. And in Norse, a bit of a bonus end of the video, you can call it a rauf or a groove or a channel. You can call it a score or a notch or a score or incision, or a spore is another word for a track, trail or furrow. And of course, those words, rauf, score or spore, are often used in Norse poetry. Yeah. Having these things are so handy. Eggle used to call them idiot boards. So when we did the long stories, I had to write down all the names of the people and the places so you could remember them. And it doesn't help. So anyway, goodbye. I'll see you in the next live stream. I'll see you in the next video. And this will be live tomorrow once it's rendered and gone through YouTube. You'll see this video, hopefully, all the comments. So it's goodbye from me. Love you guys. See you. You're awesome. Especially got this far in the video, even more so. And Bruce Dog says, see you next time. And Bruce Dog says, no problem, Braggy. Oh, yes.